Hello, this is Irv Shapiro, aka Dr. Vax, and today we're going to talk about making pens. It is possible today with a couple $100 wood lathe to start with a block of wood, or in this case it's a resin-based material. This is a block of wood. By adding components from a pen kit manufacturer and turning that block of wood to a shape that you design in order to construct a pen. So in this segment, we're going to first look at the Penpal Lathe from PSI Industries. We're going to look at a pen kit from PSI Industries. And to be honest, I'm not sure whether these wood blocks that I've chosen here are from PSI or from one of the other vendors that'll be listed in the notes. Okay, let's zoom in and get started. Let's take a look at the various components of the Penpal lathe. The Penpal lathe is a 1/5 horsepower direct drive lathe. That means the motor is directly connected to the headstock that turns the block of wood or block of plastic or acrylic that you are going to be turning. It has an on-off power switch and it is variable speed. So you can adjust the speed from 0 to about 4,000 RPM. It does come with a tool rest that you adjust to be about a 1/4 of an inch from your product. It does not come with tools with chisels. Those you have to buy separately. The end stock includes a #1 mortise taper, which means that it is a tapered connection you use to attach the tool holder to the end stop. This is what a mortise taper looks like that is inserted into the tail stop. If instead of turning on a mandrel, a steel rod, we wanted to turn between the headstop and the tail stop in a traditional way, we would use a spur on the top, on the front, on the headstop that would press into our wood, and then a live center on the tail stop. A live center just means that this turns freely. So we would press our wood together with these two components. We can adjust the pressure on the tail stop with this dial, this knob right here, and the adjustment, the attachment for a vacuum comes with the Penpal. This Penpal lathe is made of aluminum, so you do have to be a little bit careful about some of the screwed components. So this component that we screw down on the tail stop, it is possible to strip that screw. In fact, I did strip that screw on my Penpal, but it was under a 1-year warranty, and the folks at PSI Woodworking were remarkable. They immediately sent me a new tail stop. So I highly recommend the Penpal lathe as a starter lathe. It's often on sale for about $200, and it includes everything you really need except for the chisels for cutting your wood. In order to adequately demonstrate the capabilities of the PSI Woodworking Penpal, we need to have a project. The project that we're going to complete is a pen that looks similar to this pen, slightly different materials, but the same general overall fit and finish. To build that pen, we need a variety of parts. We need the parts provided by PSI Woodworking. So we have a end cap, we have a spacer between the end cap and the pocket clip, we have a pocket clip, we have the part of the pen called the transmission. That's the part that turns and twists the ink cartridge in and out. We have a decorative spacer. We have a coupler between the pen parts and the pen tip. And finally, we have a pen cartridge and a spring. And the way that works is you start with a block of wood. In this case, it's a block of maple burl. Burl, once again, is the part of the wood that's the knot of a tree. This wood has been stabilized, treated with chemicals to make it strong, and so it will turn properly. You take that block of wood and you cut it in half, effectively. In this case, slightly, with one side slightly larger than the other. You drill holes into that block of wood. I drill these on a drill press, but there are a variety of ways to drill these holes, including drilling them on the Penpal itself, and I'll be demonstrating different ways to drill pen blanks. You then glue in the brass bushings that go, or brass tubes that go inside the blank. And believe it or not, you glue these in with CA glue or super glue. However, the super glue that you buy from places like PSI Woodworking or Craft Supply or other high-end supply companies is very different than the super glue you get at your local drugstore, which has been diluted significantly to reduce the price. And this super glue is very, very strong. And then once you glue those brass tubes into those blanks, you level off the end or true up the ends of the blanks, and then these are the components that you will mount on the lathe. We'll show you that in a minute, in order to turn a pen. Now you'll notice that I have some black lines drawn on these tubes. That's so that after I cut the blank in half, I'm able to line it up again so the grain will line up properly. Because if we look at a finished pen, we want the grain to line up properly when we put the pen together, so it looks like it came from the same original blank. Okay, in order to mount our blanks onto the mandrel we'll use in the Penpal lathe, we need to first true up the ends of that particular blank. You can see that the brass tube is below the surface here. We need to ensure that the end is perfectly square. This is what it looks like when it's squared off already. This is unsquared. To do that, we're going to put our blank into a vise here. You could use a regular vise. I happen to have a vise designed for this purpose. And likewise, instead of using a drill press, you could use a hand drill to do this. I'm then going to move this up over the trimming bit, and we'll get it so it's about ½ an inch from the top. Then I'm going to put some spacers underneath, some boards underneath, because it's just easier than messing with the table over and over again. Make sure it's turning freely. Turn on my drill press and then very slowly lower the trimming bit into the top of the blank. And I want to keep checking so that as soon as I see the brass tube peeking through, I stop. Just a little bit more here. There we go. That looks about right. I'll turn this off. I'll remove my spacing blanks. And now we can see here that the tube has been squared to the blank. Okay, we're back with our blank that's now all trimmed up nicely. And we need to mount this onto the Penpal. So first we're going to take the mandrel out. We're going to put a bushing that we get with our pen kit onto the mandrel. The outside dimension of the bushing is the dimension of that component of the pen that we need to turn the blank down to. So the middle of the pen is a little thicker on one side and thinner on the other. We take and we mount our blank stock onto that. And you'll notice in this particular case, our blank stock is two different lengths because one end is a little longer than the other. So we're going to quickly check and verify that we have them aligned properly. And if we look at the instructions that came with the pen, we'll see that the upper blank is shorter than the lower blank. So we have this properly. We now put in the bushing for the top of the upper blank and the bushing for the tip of the pen. And I'm going to add one spacer on each side to give us a little bit of room between our end stock, our tailstock, and our headstock. We will mount this in the collet over here. We will slide up the tailstock with our mandrel saver, and we'll push it in as tight as we can and tighten these two screws. Now we're going to take and tighten this bolt here to ensure that when the head of this lathe turns, the rod turns properly. Now, to get it even tighter, we tighten down this screw here just so it's barely tight. There's a slot in the top of the alignment screw here, and this device, this particular screw, goes into that slot to make sure it doesn't turn, so that when we then turn here to make it a little bit tighter, it extrudes this column out and tightens everything up here. So we want it tight enough so that while we still can turn it, it's relatively tight. Then we can tighten this just a bit more. Now, once we're sure clearance looks good, we can take and turn our lathe down to 0, turn the power on, and take and make sure we're able to spin it up without difficulty. So that looks excellent. The chisels that I'm going to use for turning my pen on my Penpal lathe are the Carbine Magic chisels. I did buy these from PSI Woodworking along with the lathe. And they're carbine, which means that I don't really have to sharpen them. Instead, the way they're constructed is the blade is screwed into the end of the chisel, and when it gets dull, you just rotate it a little bit to get to a new surface. So these should last quite a while. I have 3 of these. 2 of these I'm showing you here. One is a round one that I like to use for some details, but also for my initial rough cut. The other has 2 surfaces, a completely square surface and a slightly beveled surface that I use really is for fine finishing. The third one I have is a diamond shape, which is very pointy, which would be using for making small details in the pen. Before I turn on the lathe, I'm going to check once again that everything is tight, that the tool stop is in the proper position. I want my tool to be approximately at the center of this bar when it's in the proper position. I'm going to spin this manually to make sure it's not going to hit the tool stop or the vacuum, the dust collection, which will not be on right now because of noise. So let's start with this in the 0 position and slowly turn this up. I'm going to turn this up to approximately maybe 750 or 1000 RPMs. And the reason I don't go faster initially is because I want to get a rough shape, and if I go too fast right now, I could crack or splinter this material. This is a stabilized burl, therefore it's not quite as malleable as traditional wood. With a carbine bit or chisel, you slowly advance straight into the material. Take a little bit off at a time. The key to good turning is slow and steady. You'll notice that I'm putting my hand underneath. I'm using this finger to stabilize the distance. I'm using my thumb to hold it down. With a larger turning chisel, often people stabilize against their body. When doing pens, I don't really find that to be necessary. So let's take and so this one's getting close. So I'm going to turn off my lathe for a minute, and we can see it's pretty close here. Okay, nice and smooth here. So now I'm going to put this chisel aside for now. I may need it again to get around these very edges, but I'm going to put this aside for right now, and I'm going to switch to a flat chisel. This chisel, I'm using the side that has a slight bevel. I like that better. I find the completely straight side sometimes catches just a bit. So now we'll start smoothing this out. And we'll just put a little bit here, rubbing it back and forth. Okay, I have put about 8 coats of CA glue on here. In between about every 2 to 3 coats, I did sand it down with 400 and 600 grit sandpaper. I've now used micro mesh sandpaper, which is a very fine sandpaper that starts at 1500 and will go up to 12,000. That is a wet sanding process. You'll see this is starting to take on quite a sheen. This is the 1300. So I'm going to put the speed all the way up and really polish this at this level. Okay, now that we've done the hard work of actually manufacturing, fabricating the barrel of the pen, both the upper barrel and the lower barrel, we're going to assemble it together. That's really quite easy. I'm going to use a pen vise to do that, but you could also do it with just any other type of clamp. This is a clamp you can get for under 10 bucks at your local hardware store. So the first thing we're going to do is look at the instructions here. The instructions that come with each pen clearly define for you how you can assemble that pen properly. So let's take and begin by pressing in the nut cap. So I'm going to insert this into the pen vise. In order to get enough pressure here, I'm going to add one more block over here. And we'll insert this in here, and we will press that in. And that's what it looks like once it's pressed in. Then we can actually take and screw the clip on. I like to bend this in just a little bit to make sure that the clip is going to be nice and tight against the body. So we're going to screw the clip on. There you go. It's beginning to look like a pen. Okay, now we're going to press the pen tip into the body. We're going to do this carefully and slowly. And because we cut the size of the barrel down to the bushing size, everything fits nice and smoothly here. So you can see we're beginning to put a pen together. Okay, now we're going to insert the coupler into the opposite end of this barrel. Once again, we're going to put it in very gently. Use just enough pressure. It fits perfectly. Now we'll take and insert our spring. I like to pull the spring out a little bit to make sure it's going to be nice into that. And this begins to look like a pen. And then the transmission or the mechanism screws into this coupler. And now when we turn it, the pen comes out, we turn it back, the pen goes back in. Now, if it doesn't go back in automatically, then generally that means the spring needs to be pulled out just a bit more to give it a little more force. There we go. Now we'll take and thread it in again. There we go. Now it's working nice and smoothly. And now all we have to do is put the little center band over the pen here. Do it the right way. Let's see. So this way, the center band, yep, goes this way. Like that. Squeeze the top end on, and we have a finished, beautiful pen. So I'd like to thank you for spending some time with me. Pen making is a wonderful hobby. It's a wonderful way to make gifts. In fact, there are people that use it as for side income or possibly to make a living by selling these pens on the internet, on Etsy, at various craft fairs. So it is very accessible to anyone. Wonderful, wonderful activity for someone newly retired. The equipment that I showed you here, and we'll go through this in another video, but you can really get started completely with pen turning for about $500. You're likely to spend $500 for a gaming console for a child or a grandchild. Why not spend $500 if you have a place, a shop, a garage, a basement, and you can start with a wonderful hobby. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please click like, please subscribe, and let's continue to learn together.